Spain looks like the most complete team in world football right now. They have control, they have chemistry, they have a system that can dominate possession or strike in seconds. From midfield intelligence to wide attacking speed, everything feels perfectly balanced, almost like a machine that has finally found its final form. But here's the uncomfortable truth that nobody really wants to admit. For all their depth, for all their structure, for all the talent across the pitch, there is one player who everything seems to revolve around. And he's not a veteran. He's not a proven legend. He's an 8-year-old kid. Lamine Yamal isn't just part of this Spain team anymore. He is becoming its heartbeat, its spark, its difference maker in the moments that actually decide games. And that raises a dangerous question. What happens when a team that looks perfect on the surface is quietly dependent on someone so young underneath it all? Because history has shown us that even the greatest systems can collapse when that one piece is taken away. So the real question isn't just whether Spain can win the World Cup in 2026. It's whether they can survive it without everything falling on his shoulders. Because the truth is, we're no longer talking about potential anymore. We're not watching a young talent slowly finding his place. We're witnessing something far more immediate, far more unsettling for the rest of the football world. Lamine Yamal has already crossed that invisible line where expectations stop being about the future and start being about the present. Every week, every match, every touch of the ball feels like another piece of evidence stacking up. The youngest this, the youngest that, records falling faster than anyone can keep track of them. But it's not just the numbers that are turning heads, it's the reactions. Former players calling him unbelievable. Analysts struggling to explain how someone so young can read the game like this. Defenders hesitating, not because they don't know what he'll do, but because they know they still won't be able to stop it. And that's when you realize something has shifted. He's not being introduced to the world anymore. The world is adjusting to him. There's a growing feeling that we are already inside his era, not waiting for it to begin. And when a player reaches that level of influence this early, it doesn't just elevate him. It changes the expectations of everyone around him, especially a national team that is starting to look at him not as an option, but as the answer. But it wasn't always supposed to happen this quickly. Going into Euro 2024, Spain had a clear identity, a structured system, and a squad filled with technically gifted players who understood exactly how to control games. What they didn't have was unpredictability. What they didn't have was someone who could break the script when everything else stopped working. And that's where Lamine Yamal quietly entered the picture, not as the main character, but as a risk. A 16-year-old thrown into one of the biggest stages in international football, facing experienced defenders, high-pressure moments, and expectations that usually crush players twice his age. At first, it felt like a gamble. A talented kid, yes, but still a kid. And then the game started. Instead of playing safe, he played forward. Instead of recycling possession, he attacked space. While the rest of the team followed the system, he started bending it. One assist turned into another, one moment of brilliance into a pattern, and suddenly Spain didn't just look controlled anymore, they looked dangerous. He gave them something they had been missing for years: directness, fearlessness, and a willingness to take responsibility in moments where others hesitated. And without anyone fully realizing it at the time, the role he was supposed to play began to change. He wasn't just fitting into Spain's system anymore. The system was beginning to shift around him. And this is where the conversation stops being about hype and starts becoming about proof. Because it's one thing to look exciting, it's another thing to become the player everything flows through. When you go back and actually watch Spain during that run, you begin to notice a pattern. The ball keeps finding Lamine Yamal in the moments that matter most. Not by accident, but by design. He wasn't just involved, he was central. Every dangerous sequence seemed to start with him receiving the ball wide, drawing defenders in, and forcing decisions that opened space elsewhere. And the numbers only reinforce what the eye test already tells you. Chance creation, progressive carries, successful dribbles, all of them sitting at levels you simply don't expect from someone his age. But what makes it even more impressive is how those numbers translate into real impact. These weren't empty stats built against weaker teams. These were actions happening in tight games, against organized defenses, under real pressure. You could see defenders hesitate, unsure whether to step out or hold their line, because committing to him meant leaving space behind. And that hesitation is everything at the highest level. It's the difference between control and chaos. Spain, for years, had been about control. But now, through him, They had access to chaos when they needed it most. And once a team discovers that kind of weapon, it becomes very difficult to play without it. Which leads to a deeper question that starts to form the more you watch them. Are Spain dominating because of their system? Or is the system working because it now revolves around him? And then came the moment where everything changed from belief to certainty. The semifinal against France national team wasn't just another game. It was a test against one of the most complete, most physically dominant sides in international football. They were organized, experienced, and they struck first. For the opening stretch of the match, Spain looked uncomfortable, almost hesitant, like a team that had suddenly run into something they couldn't control. And that's when the ball found Lamine Yamal. Not in a perfect position, not in a carefully constructed move, but in a moment that demanded something individual. There was a split second where he could have played it safe, recycled possession, waited for support. Instead, he shifted the ball onto his left foot and did something that didn't make sense for a player his age. From distance, under pressure, in a semifinal, he struck through the ball with a level of confidence that ignored the occasion entirely. The shot bent, rose, and found the top corner, leaving no chance, no reaction, just silence, followed by disbelief. It wasn't just a goal, it was a statement. At 16, in one of the biggest games of his life, he didn't look like the future of Spain. He looked like the present. And in that instant, something locked into place. The team that had been searching for a difference maker had found one. The world that had been watching a talent now had to accept a reality. This wasn't potential anymore. This was a player who could decide games at the highest level. But just when it started to feel like everything was lining up perfectly, reality pushed back. Because football never allows a story to stay that simple for too long. In the Nations League, against Portugal national team, something different happened. This time, the spotlight was still on Lamine Yamal, but the outcome didn't follow the same script. Standing in front of him was Nuno Mendes, a defender with the speed, strength, and discipline to match him step for step. And for the first time in a long time, Yamal didn't have the answers. The explosive dribbles weren't breaking through. The quick shifts of direction weren't creating space. Every move seemed anticipated. Every attempt closed down before it could fully develop. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a collapse. But it was something far more important. It was human. The game went on. Spain fought, but the image stayed. A player who had looked untouchable suddenly looked contained. And in moments like that, a different kind of question begins to form. Not about how great he can be, but about what happens when he can't be that player. Because if one defender, on the right day, can limit his impact, then what happens when entire teams start building their game plan around stopping him? And that's where the real danger begins to take shape. Not on the pitch, but inside the pressure building around him. Because when a player becomes this important this early, the game doesn't just test his ability, it tests his limits. Lamine Yamal isn't just playing matches, he's carrying expectations, minutes, and responsibility that most players only experience years later. The calendar doesn't slow down, the demands don't decrease, and his body is still catching up to the level he's already performing at. Small signs start to appear: fatigue, physical strain, the kind of recurring discomfort that doesn't stop you from playing, but quietly chips away at sharpness and explosiveness. And then there's the tension off the pitch. FC Barcelona want to protect their most valuable asset, while the Spain national team need their difference maker in every big moment. It becomes a push and pull that no player, especially one this young, can fully control. And all of it feeds into a single concern, not whether he's good enough, but whether he can hold up under everything being placed on him. Because if his body starts to slow down, even slightly, or if the pressure begins to affect his decisions, then the entire balance of this Spain team starts to shift. And when that balance is built around one player, even the smallest crack can become a problem no system can fix. And this is where the conversation expands beyond form, beyond tactics, and into something much bigger. Because if Lamine Yamal manages to carry this version of Spain through the 2026 World Cup, then we're no longer talking about a breakout star. We're talking about history being rewritten in real time. The comparisons start to become unavoidable. A teenager dominating on the biggest stage immediately brings back the image of Pelé in 1958, announcing himself to the world, before most players even understand what that stage truly means. Then there's Kylian Mbappe, who exploded onto the global scene by winning the World Cup at 19, using his speed and directness to overwhelm defenses. And of course, there's Lionel Messi, whose journey to the World Cup was far longer, filled with setbacks, near misses, and years of pressure before finally reaching the top. Each path is different, each legacy built over time. But what makes Yamal's situation so unique is the timing. If he succeeds now, he doesn't just follow those paths, he accelerates past them. Winning at 18 would mean achieving something even the greatest names in football history couldn't do this early. And that changes how he's viewed forever. Not as a player with potential to be great, but as someone who entered the conversation at a point where most careers are only just beginning. But with that kind of acceleration comes a different kind of weight, because the higher you rise this early, the harder it becomes to keep climbing without everything eventually catching up to you. But to understand whether this story ends in triumph or collapse, you have to zoom out and look at the team around him. Because this isn't a weak Spain side relying on a single spark. This is one of the most balanced squads in international football. On the left, Nico Williams stretches defenses with raw pace and direct runs, creating a constant threat that prevents opponents from focusing entirely on one side. In midfield, you have control and intelligence through players like Pedri and Rodri, who dictate tempo, recycle possession, and make sure the structure never fully breaks down. This is a team that can dominate the ball, but also transition quickly, something Spain teams of the past often struggled to do. And yet, even within all that quality, a pattern still exists. When the game tightens, when defenses sit deeper, when space disappears, the ball still finds Lamine Yamal. Not because they have no other options, but because he is the one most likely to change something on his own. And that's where the contradiction lives. Spain are strong enough to beat most teams collectively, but in the biggest moments, they still lean on individuality. So the question becomes sharper, more difficult to ignore. Are Spain truly this dominant because of their system and depth? Or has one player quietly become the key that unlocks everything when the system alone isn't enough? Now imagine the scene. It's July 2026. The lights are at their brightest, the pressure at its absolute peak, and the world is watching as Lamine Yamal stands on the biggest stage in football. If he lifts the World Cup with Spain national team, everything changes in an instant. The debate about the best young player in the world disappears. The conversation shifts to something far more serious, far more permanent. Where does he rank among the greatest of all time? Because winning at this age doesn't just confirm talent, it redefines what's possible. But there's another side to that moment that no one talks about enough. What if it doesn't happen? What if the weight of expectation, the physical toll, or the tactical focus of entire teams finally slows him down at the exact moment Spain need him the most? Because this story was never just about a team chasing another trophy. It was about how much one player can carry before something gives. Spain might look perfect on the surface, but perfection built on something so fragile always comes with a risk. And in 2026, we're not just going to find out if Spain can win. We're going to find out if they were ever as stable as they seemed in the first place.